So what is a critical spirit? Let me explain a little bit what I think Jesus was saying. Here's 3 marks of a critical spirit. First, never satisfied. You're never satisfied. A critical spirit must always find fault, even when they seemingly get their way and are still going to be unhappy either way. They move the goalposts to ensure that their need to be critical always remains intact. So I got a perfect example from you for the Bible. Matthew 11, Jesus is preaching. He's doing some incredible miracles in some cities, preaching everything, pouring out everything. And they are just rejecting him right and left. They are not repenting. They're not going with it at all. They reject Jesus, and he pronounces some prophetic woes on these cities. And in his frustration in their non-response, he brings up John the Baptist, and he makes a really interesting point. Jesus says to them, he says, "For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man comes eating and drinking, and they say, look at him, a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and sinners." So what's Jesus saying? You people will not be satisfied. John the Baptist was the teetotaler, the quintessential straight-laced prophet by the book, exactly like Elijah. But he preached on sin and called y'all a brood of vipers. So you didn't like John. Okay, let's try this a different way. I come in, spend time with sinners, tax collectors. I make a little wine at the wedding. I'm preaching on forgiveness all the time. And you don't like me either. So we play the flute, you don't dance. We play a funeral song, you don't cry. What do you want? Nothing works for you people. Nothing will satisfy you. That's what Jesus says to the crowd. There's a strong element of a critical spirit in what Jesus would consider judgmental. I believe that is a powerful capture of what being judgmental is. When you've made up your mind to pronounce a negative judgment no matter what, and despite evidence even to the contrary, you've got a critical spirit and you're going to be judgmental either way. That's number one. Secondly, a critical spirit can only tear down, it cannot build up. It can only tear down, it cannot build up. A critical person sees themselves as a hammer and everything in the world a nail. Everything is an argument that must be won, a debate to best the opponent. Every hill is a hill upon which to die. The motto of life is seek and destroy. But this is not what's taught in the New Testament. The primary goal of a hard conversation in the New Testament, or bringing a sin to light, or friction between people, what's the primary goal of that? When you have to have that hard conversation where sin is brought to light, why would you do that? The goal in the New Testament is restoration, reconciliation. 2 Corinthians 5 says, we have the message of reconciliation, therefore we are ministers of reconciliation. Since Jesus united sinners to a holy God, making peace through the blood of his cross, we are to take up that very same mantle and assist in reconciling people to God and to one another. Blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus says in Matthew 5:9. Even in Matthew 18:15, when the context is having an uncomfortable conversation with someone about their sin, Jesus says this, if your brother sins against you, say judge not and run away. No, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, what? You have gained your brother. Notice that it's not if your brother sins against you, don't go destroy him and make him feel terrible. The goal even of evoking a correction in someone is to make gaining that person back into the good graces of fellowship the priority. To restore that person to fellowship with God or with yourself or with the greater church fellowship. Our motivation, even in correction, is always restoration. It seems this was a big problem for the Pharisees, that their motivation in addressing sin, whenever they did address sin, it was to appear holy, to lift themselves up and to push everyone else down, to create that divide that I'm better than you. And I think that's what lost people are picking up on when they say Christians are judgmental. I think that's what they're referring to. So is it your motive to restore and love a person back into the grace of God, or is it to make yourself look good while putting them down? That is a big difference. The third mark of a critical spirit is a lack of gratefulness, missing thankfulness in your heart. There's stories all throughout the Gospels of Jesus healing people, and sometimes those healings would take place on the Sabbath. These were miraculous things, people who hadn't walked since they were born, people who were blind and then they saw, and then they're dancing and shouting and running around, having a party. And in all of these cases, every single one of those cases, if I'm wrong, you come tell me tonight, but in every single one of those cases I could find, you know what's missing? A line that goes something like this: "And the Pharisees rejoiced that a blind man received his sight." I've never heard that before. So typically, they were so blinded by their anger at Jesus that the human being became a case study to get Jesus. An example of law-breaking and blasphemy was all that person became to them. In Matthew 12:19-14, Jesus, the Pharisees, and a man with a withered hand are all standing together in the synagogue. Making an object lesson of the man, they ask Jesus, they seek him out to trap him, and they say, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" Jesus said, "Which of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more value is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And the man stretched it out and was restored, healthy like the other. Listen to this. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him, how to destroy him. Could they even pause for a brief moment and rejoice that a man got his hand back? Could they at least see the good in a situation that they weren't happy with? No, because a critical spirit cannot be grateful for anything. Thankfulness is a key component to Christian living. Being able to see the good, to see beauty, to find something to appreciate even in hard times, to find something you can agree with in a different position held by somebody else, something you can agree with, is critical to avoid being consumed by cynicism.